All right. Yep, there it was. All right, so is my screen up? Okay. So hi, everyone. I'm Dan Donahue. I am one of the owners of the Chocolate Caper, along with my wife, Elizabeth. And we also own Kickback Cafe, which we just opened downtown. And we're going to talk a little bit about chocolate, kind of where it comes from, where and how it gets into our store and onto our shelves. And then a little bit about the history of the Chocolate Caper and what we do there. So, and there's some animation in this that, yeah, chocolate. So these are all actually pictures of things we make at the Caper. And this is everything I just talked about. So we've got this process of making chocolate, and it starts with the cacao bean on the tree, ends with chocolate on the shelf. How do we get between the two? Well, the bean isn't as, or the cacao bean is not as important to us as the seeds inside. So if we go to the full process, it looks a little bit more like this. And it's very similar to coffee if you've ever looked into like coffee roasting, but I'm gesturing at my screen, which I realize does nothing for anybody watching. The pulp and beans is taken out of the bean. It's dried and fermented, which is a whole fun process of sugar development and the acids in the chocolate liqueur at that point changing. Then everything is dried, it's roasted, and then it's winnowed. And winnowing is this process of sifting it at a finer and finer level until you get to just chocolate left. So when it goes through to this point, you've got the whole bean, the shells, all the casing of the chocolate that you're looking for. So winnowing gets rid of those husks. And the more you winnow, the higher quality of the chocolate will be generally. And the smoother it will be because it doesn't have the bitterness of the husk. So if you ever hear this is winnowed 3 times versus this is winnowed 12 times, I would lean towards the one that was 12. There are plenty of other steps that definitely affect the quality, but that's a big one. And once it's winnowed and you have these what's called cacao nibs, which you can buy, they're just the raw chocolate. They're quite bitter. Those are ground, so they're turned into almost a paste at that point. And then conching occurs, which is essentially grinding in a deeper way. It's basically a roller that is pushing down incredibly hard on the chocolate against a plate. And that's what turns it into, that's where it becomes more of a peanut butter-like consistency instead of being a more chunky, wrong way, bean. So those are what cacao trees look like. They grow right now, at least, until maybe we see some changes in the climate, but they grow from 20 degrees north and south of the equator. Although we are starting to see shifts in that, both because of the ability to adjust crops to new environments and just new places becoming available. So traditionally, chocolate is grown a lot in Central and South America, and then on the Gold Coast in Africa. And it's been growing quite a bit in the Philippines and Eastern Asia. So there's quite a few places it's coming from now. It's spreading out more and more. The lines at which it can grow are widening beyond 20 degrees north and south as the temperate climate kind of expands a little bit. And that is what the bean looks like. And it's for some reference, it's about the size of a football. So they're quite large. And when you split it open, you get, and it is white, you get the pulp and the beans. And what you're going to get at the end when you're making chocolate from the bean is 2 different things. You'll have a white cocoa butter, which is sort of the sweet and just sort of half of what makes chocolate chocolate. And then you'll have what's called chocolate liqueur, which is the what most people would call the actual chocolate. So basically you're mixing the chocolate liqueur into the cocoa butter. How much the chocolate liqueur you have determines what percentage of darkness your chocolate is. So that's where you get 70% dark, 80% dark. That's the ratio of the cocoa butter to that chocolate liqueur. Fermenting and drying looks a lot. I mean, if you've seen coffee done the same way, they're very similar. Starts to look nicer and nicer and more palatable as you go along, for sure. Drying in the racks. Packaged up. And then it goes to the roaster. So the roaster is going to roast the beans. And those can be really huge roasters that are doing tons of beans at one time. And then out of that, they're going to get the pieces, and this is where we have the husks mixed in with the actual chocolate. If you can see my mouse, this is chocolate. Everything lighter is husk. So that's winnowed down, then it's conched. So this is that final grinding that's really turning it into a liquid. And that's just another view of that. So what's coming into this is those chocolate pieces that were winnowed down and don't have the husks anymore. They were ground, and then after they were ground fine, they were fed into this concher where they're being pushed into, essentially, it's not melting, but they're basically ground into liquid. And then so that's the point it gets to when we get it at the chocolate caper. So we don't roast our own, we are not a bean tavar in the sense of roasting our own beans. Maybe someday, but definitely not now. And so we get our chocolate from a company named Guittard, and the sort of unique thing about our chocolate is it's French recipe chocolate, so it's about a third the sugar of American chocolates, or it's more European recipe would be a better way to put that. It's made in California. The person who started the company actually came from a family of chocolate in France and came to the US during the gold rush to find his fortune, and discovered very quickly that he could make more money selling chocolate to the miners than actually looking for gold. And so he started up Guittard Chocolate Company, and now they're a well-known when you get into the very specialty chocolates. Sometimes you'll see them at the store. But so we get the chocolate in 10-pound bars. So take a Hershey bar and multiply it by about 200. And we will very scientifically take a mallet and smack them just to start breaking them up into pieces, and we will feed them into our tempering machine. And tempering is the process of heating and cooling I need to do this, that way when I move my hands, there it's great. It's heating and cooling the chocolate repeatedly to develop the texture, the shine, and the smooth consistency that chocolate has. So there's a couple ways to do it. This is the fancy way. This is using a spatula and just cold marble. So you're melting the chocolate, getting it to a high temperature where you break down these level 5 delta crystals. Definitely remember that. But these crystals that are in the chocolate, and when the chocolate's untempered, they're scattered everywhere. As you heat it up, you break them down and they're sort of open to being rearranged. And as you cool it in a controlled way, they form into uniform lines. And that's what gives chocolate the shine compared to a less tempered or a poorly tempered chocolate where you'll see either gray or spots, or it just will have no shine. It'll be very dull. And then anything that, if it's grainy, that can definitely be the tempering. The tempering is going to help make it much, much smoother. And just all around, it really brings out the flavors and develops the flavors that are in those beans through that process. The way we do it, so this is on marble, you basically spread it out as thin as you can, and then you scoop it all back up and incorporate it, and then scrape it out again. And you're trying to just control the temperature so it's going down very, very slowly. Because once you hit about 89 degrees, you need to stop and let it sit at that temperature. This is more similar to what we use. This is what we use. I don't know if I have, for some reason, there will be a picture of one running, I know, in a bit, but there is basically a back compartment that we put those broken up bits of chocolate into that rotates and heats up here. And then it basically is just a very precise heater that spins. That's all the machine is. And then what we do is we're setting it to specific temperatures based on the type of the chocolate. So for dark chocolate, we would go to 115 degrees and then slowly bring it back down to 89 degrees, which is right where the crystals form. If you go any lower than that, then you get these, I said they're the delta 5 crystals, you get 6 and 7s and 1s and 2s, and the chocolate kind of falls apart. When you go too hot, you break down the structure that you formed. So you're really depending on the chocolate, and really that percentage of chocolate liqueur, that's defining what temperatures you're using to temper that chocolate. So that's how we get to the chocolate bar. Health benefits of chocolate. So you sometimes hear people to say chocolate's healthy, and I'm the first to say chocolate's candy. Let's be very clear about that. It definitely, there are health benefits to it, but it is candy. But everything in moderation. So it does chemically foster happiness, alleviate stress and fear. It stimulates endorphins and will actively, it's used by, I know, by some fire departments for children who are in really stressful situations to calm anxiety, as an easy way of sort of gaining some trust and just calming people down. But I know, like, the fire department here uses books for that. It's very nutritious. It's got a ton of vitamins that you can kind of look at up there. A lot of the natural metals you need. It's packed in that sense, and it is very packed with antioxidants. Now, this is going to be relative to how dark the chocolate is, how much. This is what's in that chocolate liqueur. And so if you're having a 20% milk chocolate, the benefits are there, but not as much as compared to an 80% dark, which is an incredibly dark chocolate. And anything at the even 40, 50% mark and above is going to be pretty substantial with these. There's a lot of studies coming out that it actually improves heart health. Now, that obviously is before you add lots of other things to it, depending on what you're making. But it can improve blood flow, lower blood pressure, improve heart health. They're starting to believe. It does decrease oxidized LDL cholesterol, so you're getting less of that bad cholesterol, more of the good, lower risk of cardiovascular disease. It reduces insulin resistance, which is very interesting given how much sugar it's often mixed with. It protects the skin with vitamin D and improves brain function, which is something I could always use. And because of those endorphins, it also has some pain relieving properties. And it was used in ceremonial ways and medicinal ways, in that if you go back anywhere from really a couple hundred years to a couple thousand years, Mayan, Aztec, a lot of the Central American cultures, it was either often a sacred and a medicinal beverage made out of it, and tasted very different back then than what we have today, but definitely had some benefits to use. So now shifting gears a bit to the caper itself, just to give sort of the timeline history. It was started in 1982 by Claude and Ellen Melendez. And then they started it out of their basement. They had an apartment down there that had a separate kitchen than they had upstairs. And they started making it out of their basement, selling it at farmers markets. A couple of years went by and people started going, where can we pick up your chocolate? And so they opened their first storefront in 1986. And then just fast forward a couple of years. And in 2014, my wife and I took over. And that was, Claude and Ellen were looking to retire. They were ready to be done. And we sort of met them serendipitously, and we're just clicked very well. I have some more on that, but and it just developed into us taking over. and purchasing the business in 2014. And then we sort of immediately did some modernization. I came from a background of IT consulting. So added online ordering, the website. We added wines in 2016. So we have wines that are paired to our chocolates. In 2017, we opened a second store in Sun Prairie. Unfortunately, in 2018, it exploded as part of the gas explosion there. So that's a fun one-year experience. So instead, we shifted gears from a second store to Kickback Cafe, which from a conceptual perspective was something we had talked about for a long time. It was the dream of my wife, Elizabeth, since she was a child. And it is really a vessel for us to do a lot of the community work that we want to be doing. I'll probably talk about that a little bit more later. But so the store blew up and we kind of took that as a sign. All right, don't do a second store right now. So of course, let's open a new business instead. So we started planning for the cafe. COVID hit. We basically had to switch back to the caper and pivoting. And for us, that was just switching a lot to online fulfillment, to scenarios of connecting people. We actually saw in a lot of months an increase in business because certain products or certain just sharing the candy for different events and both having it was sort of a family building event, especially for our cocoa bombs, which I definitely will talk about more in a second. And we started doing some contactless themed deliveries. So for Easter, we had the Easter Bunny delivery program, and it was free, and you just bought whatever you wanted to go in the basket. And we brought it, the Easter Bunny kind of hopped up to the door, having gotten out of a car that's up the block, but would hop up to the door. And this is when everyone had to stay inside too, when we were first doing it. So would go up to the door, it would do a picture like standing up against the door with the other people behind the door. And it was just a lot of fun. We actually had 2 bunnies going around because it got very busy. But it was so much fun to do. And it really opened our eyes in terms of things like that. So we have the Great Pumpkin now around Halloween, who will start appearing. And we do Mother's Day deliveries. We didn't think we could really pull off delivery in the past. And then we realized we can in much of the time that people want to, as long as we don't try to do it all the time, if that makes sense. So we kind of pivoted and the cafe got put on hold. We were focusing on the caper. And then this year, August 6th, we opened the cafe. So, and the cafe just falls into the caper. I don't know, because to us, it's part of the development. The other concept with the cafe that I should mention is if you go to Europe or have been to Europe, very often there you'll see a chocolate shop and right next to it a patisserie, a bakery, sort of sweet shop, and or those will be the same, and you'll see a coffee cafe. And those are very often linked. And that was a lot of our concept, was having the cafe and having the treats kind of right next to each other. So just so they didn't get left out, that is Elizabeth next to me, which is good. And then our kids came in as Santa. He manages the caper right now. Aiden, the second oldest, is about to turn 18 in 2 weeks. And then our 13-year-old Connor and our daughter Penelope, who is 8. And they all, in one way or another, do work at the caper. So sometimes trying to do a little more than they should, Penelope. But they're all very involved and very good. So the way we got started on Elizabeth and my side is Elizabeth has a history baking. She's been baking for, I think it's about 26 years. And I became sick and was disabled for a couple of years. And we sort of had savings, and you get sick and you kind of go, this will take 3 months, we'll figure it out, we'll get it done. And 3 months later, you're like, I finally got into my first appointment with the first specialist, yay. And then 6 months later, you see the second one. And so it went on a bit longer than we planned. And while that was going on, when things started to run low, Elizabeth started baking from home. And so she made everything from, these were frozen cookies, not frozen cookies, they were cold cookies, an unlicensed similar entity. But tea parties, cake pops, which I always love because they look really cute. She really, decorating, she's amazing. And yeah, she can do the decorating and the baking both really well. This is stuff she just did for our kid. Like all our kids' birthdays, she always asks, "What do you want for your cake?" And they'll bring her a picture or a video game or something, and that it becomes this. So these I want to put in at the cafe. These are cookie critters, which we will put in at the cafe, and you can just try them because they are amazing. They are a lot of sugar, so they're a lot of energy, but they're so good. And so while she was baking, we discovered that it was not legal to do that from home without a second kitchen like Claude and Ellen had. And so we started looking for a kitchen to share. And we realized it was going into the summer. And at the time, Claude and Ellen closed the caper in the summer. And so we thought maybe they'd be willing to let us use their kitchen across the summer. So we reached out to them, and actually they were already gonna pass the business along to another woman who had worked with them for some time. And then while she was setting up the store, she unfortunately had a stroke. And we met Claude and Ellen at a fundraiser for her after that. And we had put on hold, talking to them at all about this because of everything that was going on and that. And then we bumped into each other at this fundraiser where we had been asked to donate some chocolate, and they were of course at, and bumped into each other, started talking, didn't realize who we were at first, then figured out who each other were, and decided to get together and meet. And in that meeting, about 10 minutes in at most, Claude looked at me and Elizabeth and said, "She's telling you not to talk, isn't she?" And I went, "Yep," because I have a tendency to talk a lot, as I can do very easily right now. And so Elizabeth will either, squeeze my leg or kick my ankle, being like, "Be quiet, let someone else talk." And so Claude noticed that and mentioned it, and he said, "I saw it because Ellen is doing the same thing to me." And that was sort of, we very clicked in as similar personalities, and they're still good friends to today. This is the caper when we took it over. So it still had its carpet in. It was still being set up to some extent. So this isn't how it was necessarily open door all the time. There was generally stuff set up in the stage, but there was sort of an artificial grass down there. And then just very simple Prolon A trays here and candy cases here. And that was it. It was very simple. And then the kitchen goes off to the back there. And then this is much closer to today. We've actually made a few updates very recently on top of this, with replacing this with some built-in things. And for us, our biggest problem is always having space for all the things we have to store. So anything we can make more efficient in that sense helps us out. So that's generally what we're doing. This is okay. So that was in the middle. This is very close to today. So it's come along quite a bit. This was the store in Sun Prairie. Just kind of a little nook that got a reputation. And then this was the explosion that gas main happened. Now we were where the circle is. So we are not where the bar that was right on top was. And we got very lucky. Our employee had left about 10 minutes before this happened. But yeah, that was a terrible thing. And this building, the roof actually lifted off and fell back down onto the building. So it was shut down for a couple of years. And that's sort of when we switched to the cafe. So this is just sort of starting to talk about the actual chocolate that we make. I'm just trying to think of how I share it. I'm going to do it this way.
While you're doing that, we do have a question in the chat about white chocolate and how do you do white chocolate. So in a moment, if you could pivot to that.
Well, I can answer that one relatively easy. So white chocolate is just cocoa butter. It doesn't have the chocolate liqueur that you add into milk or dark chocolate. So it is chocolate. It is derived from a cacao bean, but it is only the cocoa butter portion of it, usually with milk, sugar. A lot of people do think it doesn't exist because very often what people use is almond bark, which is sort of an imitation that's just sugar and milk for the most part and some flavoring. And that is not chocolate, and it's not nearly as good. But white chocolate you can find. You just want to be looking at the ingredients and making sure it has cocoa butter in it, and that it's real white chocolate. See if this will work.
Pouring in some passion. We all want to make each other feel happy. And that's what this is. It's a little happiness in a cup. The chocolate gapers Elizabeth Donahue and her husband Dan created a one-of-a-kind cup of hot cocoa. So this.
Okay, I started that one early. Wrong tab.
On all.
There we go.
This is all the little bits. Yeah, all the behind the scenes. Nothing more decadent than watching worker Wendy Fordrain pour out this perfection.
Yeah, the chocolate appetite seems to be insatiable.
So this season at the Chocolate Caper, no time to even lick the bowl.
We have hands on all of it.
This is all the little bits, yeah, all the behind the scenes, if you will, of how we get boxes made and how we get candy into the cases. Elizabeth Donahue working 7-day-a-week stretches, all to meet those dark and light Swiss chocolate demands. We blend our European recipe chocolate, which is 1/3 the sugar of American chocolate, no preservatives other than your salt and sugar. Chocolate, Elizabeth knows, creates the 37-year Chocolate Caper signature sweet bar called Prolon A. Prolon A is a Swiss-French confection, and it literally kind of, the word boils down to candied nuts. So you get a lot of different types of pralines or pralines. And this old world treat, one Elizabeth's husband Dan knows, travels all across the world.
Most of Europe, most of Asia, South America, Canada quite a bit. And then we have people who come from Iowa and Minnesota and Illinois and Michigan and driving for hours just to pick up their holiday orders. It's really become like a family tradition for them.
All as the woman behind it all, Ellen Mahonda, stops in for another box of Christmas chocolate after leaving her family's legacy to the Donahues 5 years ago.
Not only carried on, but expanded and made it better and bigger, and I think it's wonderful.
To keep that sweet success going straight throughout the holiday season, the Chocolate Caper had to stock up on the chocolate, the raw cocoa nibs. They had to buy 4,000 pounds of them. We've gone through a lot of it, most of it at this point. We'll continue to make chocolate through this week, but then we may sell out. Because the Chocolate Caper's quickly giving its heart this holiday. Throw a little bit of love in there. In Oregon.
And that's really special to us that we get to be a part of these traditions.
Catherine Larson, Spectrum News.
So that's a little bit of, I just like that story really concisely sort of describes Prolon A and what we do. This is going to start at the beginning again if I do that. So as Elizabeth was saying in there, Prolon A is our signature product. We're the only ones who make it that we know of really in the US. And so this is our tempering machine that I talked about earlier. And then Prolon A is we are fusing the nut butters into the chocolate while it's tempering. So almond butter, hazelnut butter, peanut butter are mixed into the chocolate and then topped with a solid layer of chocolate. And in the toffee almond, you have roasted nuts and roasted almonds and ground toffee mixed in as well. So that's the only one that's crunchy that we make. This is a tray of it. This is a tray of milk chocolate almond. So that's sort of what we get at the end. And then it goes into the boxes. So the Prolon A is what we are most known for. We do have quite a few other things. So gels, we have wine and beer gels as well as fruit gels. So we have your traditional orange, raspberry, blackberry dipped in chocolate. And then we have a Cabernet, a white Merlot, a stout beer, and they're very, really interesting, good combinations. Chocolate can go, the longer that goes on, I'm always surprised at how many things chocolate can go with. You can find a way to put it into almost anything. Mint tulips, as we call them, sort of a peppermint patty We do a ton of different lollies for every season. This actually, I need to update this picture. We've started decorating them with color as well. So now they're different colors. We can actually change the chocolate of the color of the white milk and dark chocolate too. So you get some really cool designs coming out. And then last year, we started making cocoa bombs. And in, I think it was September, October. And then Catherine, well, I'll let Catherine talk about it first, and then I'll tell you what happened.
Pouring in some passion.
We all want to make each other feel happy. And that's what this is. It's a little happiness in a cup.
The chocolate
You
cake
are
was
still
hosted by
sharing
Hugh and her
the
husband, Dana,
PowerPoint and
created
not
a
the.
one-of-a-kind cup of hot cocoa.
So this is 6 years in the making of figuring out how to actually powder it and be able to send it out the door with customers.
Their famous European Prolon A, now powdered, covered in marshmallows before capped in a circular shell of, you guessed it, your chocolate.
Dan,
Magic up in here.
you are still sharing the PowerPoint
Since the signature
and not the
cocoa
video.
bombs debuted.
Where I just keep churning them out and they keep hollering at me, we need more, we need more.
More requests for the globe-shaped treats coming from across the world, even Costa Rica.
Interesting because it's kind of the chocolate going back to where it came from. Some of the beans in our chocolates come from Costa Rica. So now we're sending it back just in different form.
The main challenge in making these magic drinking chocolates, well, that's in buffing the bombs, because each one has to be buffed to perfection.
You really, it's just a matter of getting the touch for it, because you press too hard and you get brush marks.
Why Wendy Fortrain, the queen of those candy-colored coatings.
And you can kind of buff that nice color into it. And they just look like these giant pearls.
Thankfully, at $5.95 a piece, not pricey pearls.
It's always been very important to me that we stay priced affordably. So how little can we sell them for? Because you know that this is going to be something that delights children, and I don't want anyone ever walking out of here empty-handed. So,
But always coming out with a cup of comfort.
spend a little fun time as a family. It's a nice treat. It's a nice dessert. It's a science experiment, and it's just a moment to share together, which we're all in desperate need of right now. A moment of joy to share together with the people that you love.
In Oregon, for Spectrum News, I'm Catherine Larson.
So we recorded that story, and then it went on the news, and then it got picked up by Spectrum National, and then our phone exploded. Within a week, we had to stop answering the phone. And I think in 6 weeks, we made about 4,000 orbs. And that became a lot of last year. So we started way ahead this year. We are very much more prepared this year. But that's a newer product that we've made that really is that especially last year was a year that people could not be together, but they could send these out, have different people together, get on a Zoom, and all pour the milk over and kind of enjoy them together. And we had a lot of people, writing us, telling us that that's what they were doing, and that's what we're looking. That's what our goal is with our chocolate. So, and I am glancing at chat now, so I see. As to how chocolate became a solid treat, I have to be honest, I'm not sure. I know in the development of chocolate, it was traditionally a drink here. It made it over to Europe in the 1600s. And in Europe, there hadn't been chocolate before. So the primary candy was candied nuts. And this is where Prolon A comes from. So candied nut ground up is called Prolon. And it was used in everything from cakes, in fact, mostly cakes, but cakes, it'd be a candy, all sorts of things that they'd almost use it like a flour. And then chocolate made it over and they started mixing the chocolate in, and it became called Prolon A. And that's where the name comes from that we use. So some point in there, when chocolate made it to Europe, it really exploded, especially in the ways people started playing with using it. That's when you get a lot of the innovations just with things you can do with chocolate. I have a link at the end of the presentation to chocolate chantilly, which is a lot of chocolate can be chemistry, and you can do some really fun things with it based on that. So my guess into why it shifted over was just people exploring different ways and different forms for it. Because when it hit Europe, everyone wanted it. There was no lack of demand. And there still isn't. Our biggest problem this year is finding chocolate. So fortunately we have, hopefully we can find more. Oh, so the chocolate caper today. So we're in the same retail store that now we've been in for about 25 years. No, we've been in now for 18 years. We've been in a store for closer to 25. We have our online store at chocolatecaper.com. That also, and something I should mention, has order forms for the holidays. We also mail those out. So if you'd like to receive one by mail, you can email info@chocolatecaper.com and just send us your address and we'll make sure you get one. But if you want to be able to pick the chocolate that you get, we strongly suggest placing an order. You can generally come in and still pick up a box through the first week of December or so, but anything beyond that is hit or miss. We almost always sell out, and I just really encourage, I hate when someone comes in late and they're looking for something and I have to say, I don't have it, especially around the holidays. So just plan ahead. And I'll say that for anything you're doing, chocolate, jewelry, everything is slow this year. And shipping times, we learned last year, are way up. So definitely think ahead. And it just mentions here, we are not just Prolon A and cocoa bombs. That would be an interesting store, but we also have 50 varieties of truffles. We have caramels, toffee, potato chip bark, dipped orange peel, dipped ginger, all sorts of other things for you to try. Almost all that, trying to think if there's any exceptions. No, all that do have chocolate in them. So we don't have anything that's not chocolate. Except the wines. And most of our wines are chocolate wines, so it's not even completely true there. And we are on the restaurant show pretty regularly, doing demos or different things like that on TVW, different things you can do with chocolate, different things going on at the store. So if you're around and looking for something to watch, the restaurant show is it's sort of like the Food Network, this show, except it's confined to Greater Dane County. So anything you see on the show, you can actually go get, which is really nice. When I always watch Food Network and I'm like, that looks really good. It is 5,000 miles away. This works a bit smoother into being able to actually find it. And then I'm just going to mention, I'm going to be very quick with this, and feel free to email that info@chocolatecaper.com and I can send you all this. It's also on our website. Chocolate chantilly is a chocolate mousse, except it's made only with chocolate, with no other ingredients except a little bit of sugar. And it is based on this principle of, how chemistry do I want to get? I'll just get into the lipids. So the chocolate repels water. They don't want to mix together without an emulsifier. They are pushing each other apart as hard as you can. So what we do in this is we melt the chocolate and we heat it up and break down all those crystals. We mix in some sugar, and we can mix in water. So if you have chocolate that's tempering, maybe, and if you've melted chocolate at home, you may have experienced this, and water hits it, it can seize, where it immediately goes from this nice liquid to a hard ball, and it will never change from that hard ball. You can't melt it, you can't turn it back. It's just done. While the chocolate's melted, you can mix water in without it seizing. So what you do is you mix the water in, then you put that into an ice bath and you whip it as fast as you can while it's cooling down. And what happens is you basically are causing an emulsion where you are whipping air bubbles in between the molecules of chocolate. So it's the same concept as whipped cream, except the chocolate is the cream. And the result as you go is the chocolate does start to harden again because the temperature is coming down, but it never does completely. And it ends up in this sort of, you can control based on how far you whip it from a pudding to almost a really thick form of mousse. So it's a really fun and simple thing to do with if you have kids or grandkids or anyone who just is interested in something simple around cooking. It's a fun and easy thing. You need water, sugar, some chocolate, and a pot. So and a whisk. So pretty easy to do. So, and there's a demonstration of how to do it too. This is linked to off our website.
Welcome.
I'm not going to play that whole video right now. And questions, and maybe a new one in chat. Have we ever considered having a how-to or hands-on class? Yes, very much so. Our issue right now, it's that space issue, and there's healthcare licensing things that go with that. So our space right now is not big enough to accommodate sort of a teaching environment where we could have dedicated tables, and we're not licensed for it. There's places like Feed that you can rent, but they really, to me, become price prohibitive for your attendees because of how much they cost to rent. So we are trying, but what COVID taught us is we have Zoom. And we're working on thinking about ways to create that ability, through Zoom, where we can mail out kits with everything you need ahead of time, and then have a scheduled or maybe recorded Zoom that you go on to and do everything hands-on together. So that is something that we have on our mind. We tend to have a lot of things too many things on our mind at once. So I can't say when we might get to it, but it's high on the list. So, and do we offer wine tastings? We didn't, because we did not have a license to serve alcohol at the Caper. We could sell it, but not an on-premise license. But with the cafe, which does have a liquor license, we are going to start doing some pairings. We will have wines at the several wines at the cafe, as well as a couple specialty drinks, and we will have those paired with different chocolates and be rotating that on a somewhat regular basis. So yes, we are going to do some pairings now that we sort of have all the licensing and infrastructure in place that we need to.
I have a question. So my question is, why does American chocolate have so much sugar, and does the sugar affect the tempering?
The tempering, not especially, because sugar has a much higher melting point. Chocolate will stay liquid at 89 degrees, and really down to 81, 82 degrees if you have it if you're managing it the right way. So the sugar doesn't affect the tempering too much. I think one of the things that defines American chocolate is higher sugar. And I don't mean that in a bad way, just in relative comparisons, the European has a little bit less. American chocolate, America's the home of milk chocolate. So that wasn't really a thing until Hershey came to Pennsylvania, and he started mixing milk into chocolate, and he really is the one who developed milk chocolate. And that sort of caused the explosion. And I think that when that was happening, that time period is when people really were looking for sweet. And so that just, more sugar got added. But that is completely me throwing out there what I think. So I can't guarantee that. I haven't had time to look it up. What percentages of chocolate do we offer? Our darkest is about a 65%. Our milk is 30 something. I want to say 37%. It does vary batch to batch of chocolate. So every batch of chocolate's a little different. If you work with someone good, they'll have spec sheets that are a little bit different for every batch based on how it's made. So yeah. And then white chocolate would be 0. So any other questions?
So I recently heard of Ruby chocolate. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, Ruby chocolate. Calibut is the main company doing it right now, to the point that I think they might have a patent on the current process. Ruby chocolate is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It is a naturally red chocolate. It's from a different cacao bean, and it's processed, well, a slightly different cacao bean, and it's processed in a different way. I'm not incredibly familiar with the process. I haven't looked at it yet closely. I've tasted it. It is, it's unique. It's sweet on the sweeter side. It reminds me more of whiter milk chocolate, but it's, you kind of have to try. It's really hard to describe, and it's very hard to find. But if you look up Calibut chocolate, Callebaut, I believe, who is one of the really good chocolatiers. They're definitely in that elite group. You can find it from them, I know for sure. So it is a real thing. It is real chocolate, and it is not food dye. Anything else? I mean, I can always talk for all night, but that it won't be interesting. All right, I will give the screen back to. How do I do this? No, I just